David Bowie was used to shocking audiences, but in 1976, one chilling gesture left his fans absolutely disgusted. David Bowie isn't just a household name, he's a cultural shapeshifter. Mention him alongside legends like Michael Jackson, Queen, or the Beatles, and few would argue. But while those names conjure clear images, Bowie remains elusive. He reinvented himself so often it's hard to tell where the act ended and the truth began. Was it all a brilliant performance? Or was it something deeper? A man in search of his own identity? Born David Roberts Jones, Bowie lived a standard life. His mother worked as a waitress, and his father was a promotions officer for a children's charity. Few things were remarkable about his early upbringing. It wasn't his childhood that created his uniqueness. Bowie grew up the same as thousands of other children in 1950s England. But before he even reached adulthood, Bowie proved his magic came from within. Even at the age of 6, Bowie had already distinguished himself as unique. His teachers at Stockwell Infant School recalled him as an exceptionally gifted child. As Bowie grew, so did his personality. By the age of 9, teachers remarked on his dancing skills, calling him vividly artistic, and remarking that his poise was astonishing for a child. All that raw talent needed something to focus on. Around the age of 9, his father brought home a collection of records that included many American artists, including Elvis Presley and Little Richard. Little Richard in particular spoke to Bowie, so much so that he received a heavenly revelation. In particular, he later recalled that he heard God after listening to Richard's Tutti Frutti. And with that, music wove itself into Bowie's soul, ultimately changing him forever. Bowie started playing both the ukulele and tea-chest bass by the end of 1957. He also began playing the piano around the same time. He would perform tributes to his favorite artists, such as Elvis and Chuck Berry, at every opportunity. Viewers of one performance to his local Wolf Club group described it as mesmerizing, like someone from another planet. Even at this early age, nothing could define Bowie's energy, and he was just getting started. Bowie took great inspiration from the world around him. Few people had as much influence on his early life as his half-brother, Terry Burns. Burns suffered from schizophrenia and seizures, keeping him away from home fairly often. However, when he was home, he influenced Bowie, getting him into many things including beat poetry, the occult, and modern jazz. So, Bowie managed to draw influences from his brother despite his time away, but his ability to find silver linings in things soon came up against a major setback. While Bowie studied art, music, and design, tragedy struck. He was at school when a disagreement blossomed between Bowie and his friend, George Underwood. This disagreement escalated so much that Underwood punched Bowie in the face. Underwood was far from the first young boy to punch his friend due to a disagreement. But unfortunately, this turned out to be a schoolyard scuffle they couldn't just walk away from. You see, Underwood accidentally scratched Bowie's left pupil during their entanglement. This led to 4 months of hospitalization for Bowie, in which he underwent a series of surgeries. Unfortunately, they couldn't repair the damage. Not only did this leave Bowie with faulty depth perception, but his left pupil became permanently dilated. Ultimately, things worked out. His dilated pupil became one of Bowie's most recognizable features, but he still had a long way to go before anyone really cared enough to notice. Bowie's aspirations quickly outgrew that of those around him. He formed his first band at the age of 15. The Conrads, however, didn't share Bowie's vision for the future. Frustrated by this, Bowie left the Conrads to join the King Bees. This time, he decided he would make the King Bees a success, even if he had to do all the work himself. Bowie wrote to John Bloom, an entrepreneur, inviting Bloom to promote the King Bees. The offer didn't interest Bloom. However, he did connect Bowie with Leslie Kahn, who promoted Bowie and his first single. Unfortunately, the King Bees didn't fit Bowie's aspirations either. Yet again, he left them for another band he hoped could make his dreams come true, and once again, found himself out of luck. Bowie's third band during this period of his life was the Manish Boys. He harbored a dream of being their Mick Jagger. Unfortunately, the Manish Boys didn't have what it took to help Bowie meet his potential. So, Bowie left them and joined another band, the Lower Third. Had Bowie finally met his match? Perhaps, though not with the Lower Third. It was during this period of constant band hopping that Bowie found himself a love match that did last. at least for a time. Bowie met actress, singer, and songwriter Dana Gillespie in 1964. Bowie was 17, Gillespie was 14. Despite their apparent youth and Bowie's complicated lifestyle, Bowie and Gillespie remained in a relationship, both personally and professionally, for a decade. But while things in his romantic life soared, things in his career got tricky. Around this period, Bowie also had another problem. Up until this point, Bowie had been going by Davy or Davy Jones professionally. However, this name was already taken by a member of the popular band, the Monkees, making it difficult for Bowie to make a name for himself without opening himself up to confusion. So he took on a new name, one that no one would ever forget. David Bowie became David Bowie thanks to James Bowie, an American pioneer who popularized the Bowie knife. Bowie released his first single, Can't Help Thinking About Me, under his new stage name in January 1966. He had stayed with the lower third up to this point. However, when that single flopped too, Bowie yet again packed up his bags and started looking for another opportunity. Bowie briefly worked with a small handful of other bands during the mid-1960s. However, he saw little success with any of them. In April 1967, he officially went solo, releasing his debut album, David Bowie. However, the world wasn't ready for the unique blend of music that Bowie created. The album, which featured a mix of music from pop to psychedelic, flopped just like the others. Bowie began thinking that the problem may have been him all along. David Bowie then found a new direction for his life. One of the influences that his brother passed on to him was Buddhism. His interest in religion began in 1967, and as his career began to stall out, Bowie started thinking that it may provide an alternative for him. But he didn't just want to become a full-time Buddhist, he wanted to become a monk. In Bowie's words, he first met his Buddhist tutor, Chaim Rinpoche, in his New York office. Bowie came downstairs and saw Rinpoche, who said, in broken English, "You are looking for me." Bowie later realized this had been a question, but as a teen struggling with his passions, Bowie took it as a statement. He was looking for Rinpoche. Unfortunately, Rinpoche may not have been looking for him. In the end, Bowie wasn't meant to become a monk. Although he spent several months studying under Rinpoche, the instructor could see that he just couldn't cut it. Religion wasn't what Bowie was meant to be doing. Rinpoche told Bowie, "You don't want to be Buddhist. You should follow music." In other words, Bowie had been lost, and although Rinpoche did not help him find himself, he'd soon discover that he put him on the path back to shocking success and glaring honesty. The question of Bowie's sexuality followed Bowie for the majority of his career.
Do you mind talking about your sexuality?
Sorry, why?
Because what was the deal there? You were gay for a while.
He first announced that he was gay in 1972. He later clarified that he was bisexual. Living up to this identity remained a struggle for Bowie for most of his career. He never wanted to represent a whole group of people. However, in 1967, the question of his sexuality was more a private matter, one between him and those that he cared for. Bowie met Lindsay Kemp, a male dancer and performer, in 1967. Bowie enrolled in Kemp's dance class at the London Dance Centre, and Kemp ultimately viewed his influence on Bowie's life and career as significant. He later said, "I taught him to express himself through his body, how to touch a public. Just as important was the stillness and to make every movement count." Even more intriguingly though, the two eventually took their most passionate moves off the dance floor. Kemp later stated that he felt a connection with Bowie before meeting him. Kemp related to Bowie's music, and Bowie appreciated Kemp's performances as well. Kemp thrived off of what Bowie offered him. According to Bowie, the instructor lived on his emotions. He was a wonderful influence. His day-to-day life was the most theatrical thing I'd ever seen, ever. However, it would not last, romantically at least. David Bowie had a 10-year age gap with Kemp, and to add more insult to injury, Bowie couldn't stay faithful. Reportedly, discovering that Bowie was sleeping with another person, a woman, ended their personal relationship. However, they continued to work together professionally. Bowie credited Kemp with helping him develop his interest in image. It was through working with Kemp that Bowie came to understand his ability to use his body to create connection. It was also through Kemp that Bowie met his next lover. Bowie appeared in The Pistol Shot, a BBC play, in 1968. Kemp choreographed a dance scene for it and paired Bowie with another dancer, Hermione Farthingale. Bowie and Farthingale quickly hit it off. They started to date and eventually moved in together. Unfortunately, it was another relationship that could not last. and Bowie, according to his own words, was to blame. Farthingale left for Norway to film Song of Norway in early 1969, ending her relationship with Bowie in the process. Bowie later stated that breaking up was his fault, insisting he was unfaithful and couldn't for the life of him keep it zipped. Bowie's relationship with Farthingale stayed with him, inspiring a couple of songs. It also may have primed him for another huge mistake he made shortly after losing her. Bowie met Mary Angela Barnett in 1969. Reportedly, the pair met through a mutual friend with Calvin Mark Lee, a recording executive. The pair married a year after meeting on March 19, 1970. However, anyone thinking that Bowie and Barnett's quick marriage was indicative of a fairy tale romance couldn't be more wrong. We'll likely never know the truth of their marriage for certain. However, Barnett later informed the world that the marriage was one of convenience. In Barnett's own words, "We got married so that I could get a permit to work." According to Barnett, she never expected the marriage to last. Furthermore, she noted that before they got married, Bowie plainly told her, "I am not really in love with you." As you can imagine by now, it certainly didn't prove to be an easy marriage. Bowie later commented that living with her was like living with a blowtorch. Their marriage was a turbulent one. However, they maintained an open marriage, which may have better suited Bowie's inability to settle down during this period. All things considered, though, it seemed the couple also had some attraction to each other, as they had one son. Initially named Zoe Bowie by his parents, he now goes by Duncan Jones. And while Bowie managed to find some version of normalcy in his personal life, he still had his unstable music career to contend with. During all of this turbulence in his love life, Bowie's career continued on. His work with Kemp gave him a better interest and understanding in crafting a persona to go along with his music, and he saw early success composing songs for other artists. However, David Bowie continued to fail to be a name of note in its own right. Faced with his own failure, Bowie decided to start experimenting. Bowie tried his hand at many different acts and approaches. However, few of them saw the success that he craved. Perhaps in what felt like a final try, Bowie told the whole truth in one of his songs. Leaning into his frustration with both his work and his love life, Bowie wrote Space Oddity, a song that told the tale of a fictional astronaut, Major Tom, and with that, Bowie finally struck gold.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the...
Space Oddity earned him a place with Mercury Records, and they released the single 5 days before the Apollo 11 launch. Bowie finally found a hit, with Space Oddity reaching the top 5 in the UK. Unfortunately, it would be another 3 years before he saw the same kind of success again. Bowie released his third album, The Man Who Sold the World, in 1970. It had a harsher sound than his earlier acoustic work, landing it more confidently in the hard rock category. The original UK cover also leaned into Bowie's unique androgynous look. He appeared on the cover in a dress, a look that he received praise for, and possibly inspired his future personas. It may surprise modern viewers who believe the past to be far more straight-laced than it was, but the critics and general public received Bowie's choice to wear a dress fairly well. Leaning into the choice, Bowie wore the dress to interviews as well. The critics loved it. Rolling Stone's Josh Mendelson described Bowie as ravishing, almost disconcertingly reminiscent of Lauren Bacall. This may have been the start of his next big idea. During the tour for this album, inspiration struck Bowie. He began to play around with the idea of a character who melded the personas of two well-known American musicians at the time, Iggy Pop and Lou Reed. In doing so, he hoped to create the ultimate pop idol. Borrowing from others didn't concern Bowie. In his words, "It's not who does it first, it's who does it second." Regardless, Bowie always put his own personal twist on everything. Clad in psychedelic costumes and dyeing his hair a vibrant reddish brown, Bowie unveiled his character, Ziggy Stardust, in 1972. The idea was to make Ziggy appear as if he landed from Mars. He launched the show accompanied by the band he'd put together a few years prior, the Spiders from Mars. With his notably bizarre new emergence, his team held their breaths waiting for the audience's response to the new David Bowie. The result stunned everyone. The show was a hit, strange and otherworldly. No one could rival the influence Bowie created. As Ziggy Stardust, Bowie finally reached true stardom. The result became the Cult of Bowie, and has been argued to have an influence that has not been replicated since. Questions of whether this gimmick had staying power vanished with the release of the single Starman.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it.
Bowie made it, finally, but of course, every success comes at a cost. The success of Ziggy came from one of Bowie's truly unique abilities. He completely lost himself in his character. He considered himself an actor and embodied the persona of Ziggy. It gave him the ability to be free on stage, setting David aside when he took the stage to be Ziggy. Unfortunately though, the switching back and forth soon became a problem for Bowie. Ziggy wouldn't leave him alone. The danger of stepping into the role of Ziggy Stardust over and over, night after night, was that Bowie began to have difficulty separating Ziggy from David. Ziggy shows were high energy, they were theatrical, dramatic, and some may have even said unhinged. It proved a dangerous persona for Bowie to have hanging over him once he stepped off stage. In Bowie's own words, Ziggy wouldn't leave me alone for years. At that point, Bowie began to struggle. His persona that he put on for the stage affected his entire personality. Again, according to Bowie, I really did have doubts about my sanity. It became clear that he and Ziggy needed a permanent separation. After a year of touring as Ziggy, performing as Ziggy, and even doing interviews as Ziggy, Bowie brought it all to an abrupt end. He announced his retirement while on stage at London's Hammersmith Odeon in July 1973. The Spiders broke up, and Ziggy was hung up for good. However, now Bowie wasn't done with music. He just needed to find something else to do, or perhaps someone else to be. In 1974, Bowie moved to America and released another album. His success continued, despite leaving Ziggy behind. However, his mental state began to deteriorate. His use of substances quickly became an addiction, emaciating his body and wreaking havoc on his mind. And the more he rose, the more he struggled to keep it together. In late 1974, he released a live album of his Diamond Dogs tour. Bowie's mental state had deteriorated so far by this point that he was barely getting through life. He later joked that the album, called David Live, should have been called David Bowie is Alive and Well and Living Only in Theory. Still, his fame continued to grow, even as he continued to fall. As his success grew, Bowie took on another persona, the Thin White Duke. He also became consumed by his addictions. He barely slept during the recording of Station to Station, and only remembers flashes of making it. At the height of his addiction, Bowie made comments he'd later regret. According to him, he'd all but lost his mind. During the tour from station to station, Bowie continually made statements or appeared with paraphernalia that expressed admiration for World War II Germany. In the Victoria Station incident, a camera captured Bowie mid-wave that mimicked an unfortunate salute. Bowie later claimed that all these actions were induced by his addictions and the persona he had adopted as the Thin White Duke. Yet again, he struggled to separate himself from the persona.
For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details.
By August 1976, Bowie could not take it any longer. He escaped to Germany along with his old friend Iggy Pop. Together, the two artists strove to escape their addictions and create music. Bowie created 3 albums that have become known as the Berlin Trilogy, before appearing on stage for the Isolar Second World Tour. It was the first time in a long time that he'd toured without the crutch of substances, but even freed from his substance issues, he couldn't fix everything in his life. Bowie's marriage finally reached its natural conclusion by the end of this period as well. According to Barnett, the marriage had never been legitimate, and many sources have called it turbulent at best. Bowie and Barnett entered divorce proceedings, and they finally divorced by 1980. Bowie retained custody of their son. Barnett claims that she did this to give Bowie stability from his addictions, although evidence suggests Bowie had managed those already by this time. Even with the divorce though, it seemed things might just be looking up. Bowie's success continued to grow through the 80s. He released several more albums, most of which saw success, and reached his personal career peak with the release of Let's Dance in 1983. He partnered with many relevant musicians from the period, and he starred in the cult classic Labyrinth. which he also wrote 5 original songs for. He finally reached the professional career that he had been dreaming of, and it seemed his personal life might soon follow suit. Bowie continued to be romantically associated with several people throughout the years. However, none of them would ever compare to his second wife, Iman. Bowie and Iman met in October 1990. He knew from the moment that he met her that she was the one for him. Bowie recalled, "I was naming the children the night we met. It was that immediate." They married in 1992 and had 1 daughter together. Throughout his career, Bowie took on many personas. He also went back and forth on his stance on matters of religion and politics, bouncing from Buddhist to undoubtedly believing in God to stating that he was an atheist. Above all things, one matter that never settled was of his sexuality, but it was always contested, both in public and at times by himself. Since announcing he was gay in 1972, Bowie constantly dealt with the questions of his sexuality. In 1983, he claimed publicly announcing his preferences was the biggest mistake he ever made. He even stated that he was always a closet heterosexual. However, Bowie changed his mind again in later years. Bowie wanted to be a singer and a performer. He seemed to always struggle with sharing personal matters with the public as a result of this. In 2002, he took a slightly different stance on the matter of his preferences. He said, "I don't think it was a mistake in Europe, but it was a lot tougher in America. I had no problem with people knowing I was bisexual, but I had no inclination to hold any banners nor be a representative of any group of people. Bowie just wanted to sing, which he did for the rest of his life." David Bowie continued creating right up until his passing. Although diagnosed with liver cancer in mid-2014, he kept that information private. His final album, Black Star, released on January 8, 2016, on his 69th birthday. Bowie succumbed to his illness 2 days later. Around the world, fans made tributes to the artist who had changed their lives. He changed genres so many times that few musicians today are not influenced by David Bowie in some way. He truly shaped the world of music as we know it today. And without a doubt, there will never be another David Bowie. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.